that. Hey, Blake, I stay busy. It's time to bring in Brett McMurphy. It's time for us to go into our Speak Easy Lounge. Go ahead and play the intro for me, Blake. Let's go ahead and get Brett McMurphy in here. Brett, what is going on? First of all, do you love that intro, Brett? You got to tell me you love that.
I love it. I feel like I need a cocktail here. It's only, it's only 11:20 here on the East Coast. It's only 10:20 for you guys. So I feel like I need a cocktail though.
Well, technically the bars are open at 11 o'clock, right? So technically you could, right?
If you in wanted. Florida, I don't think they ever shut down on War. You remember that.
Brett, so first and foremost, thank you for coming. I want to let you know too, since we are on this platform, I know you're a polished TV person, but feel free to take your time. There's no hard outs. No one's going to scream in your ear. So you're more than good to take your time with whatever you want to do. Brett, I wanted to talk to you because you're a friend, almost at this point, a lifelong friend. At this point, we've known each other for only 25 or more years easily. And I still look good. Brett, this whole thing it's been crazy when I've looked at the Big 12 this past weekend, and I kind of want to get your take on there, what Brett Yormark's been able to do. It seemed like about a year ago, Brett, like we were talking about, man, like the Big 12 may have to fold into the pack, and they, this conference may be on its way out. And so many power moves were made by Yormark, and you see kind of the creme de la creme this past weekend. I want to kind of get your take on what's been happening.
Yeah, well, basically, you're right, Anwar. And when Texas and Oklahoma, it was at SEC Media Days when that story broke that Texas and OU were headed to the SEC. Everyone thought, the Big 12's dead. What are they going to do? And Brett Yormark, he took a gamble. He went out and went a year early on his TV deal. And at the time, a lot of people criticized him. He said, you're not going to get as much money as you could get by going early. But you know what? He took a chance. He wanted to be aggressive. And what happened is, obviously everyone knows this by now. He got the deal done with the ESPN and Fox, $31.7 million, which is actually pretty remarkable after losing OU and Texas. So they were able to get a good deal. And then and anyone knew it at the time, but what it did is it capped what the Pac-12 could get, because now the Pac-12 is trying to get a deal without USC and UCLA. Nobody's going to pay them more than what the Big 12 is getting, because they're the programs without SC, they're the conference without USC and UCLA, simply is not worth that much. So now it painted the Pac-12 in a corner, and then they kept putting it off, and then the George Kliavkoff, their commissioner, made a lot of bad decisions along the way. And one is, he had potential to sign some deals that maybe at 80% of what he wanted. He was trying to get 110% of what he wanted. That simply wasn't going to happen, because the media companies, ESPN specifically and others, had mass layoffs. They didn't have as much money as they had. And then also, whoever's decision it was for him not to talk to the media in the past 12 months, I thought was a major mistake. Because Anwar, if you're not saying anything, then everyone else is going to talk for you. They're gonna shape the narrative. And look, in today's world, perception is reality. And the perception was the Pac-12 was weak, the Big 12 was strong, they were growing. And now, fast forward to today, and the Pac-4, what's left, is talking to the Mountain West. And they may try to do a merger. They may try to, combine for it. I don't know what they're going to end up doing. And then the Big 12 sitting there with 16 schools, and they are now in a position of strength, because they are the third most secure conference. I mean, 1 and 2, that game's over with. Texas landed in the SEC. Their athletic department is set for the next 100 years. Kudos to them. Nobody is going to get close to the Big Ten and the SEC, the two behemoths in college athletics. But what the Big 12 has done is they've firmly established themselves as the next best option, because they look out to the West and the Pac-12 is falling apart. And you look to the East, August 15th onward, that's the deadline if teams want to leave the ACC and get into a new conference next year. And Florida State has been very vocal. Will they do something before August 15th? Maybe, maybe not, but they're certainly going to do something within a year. And then you wonder, Clemson will follow, Miami will follow. Will Notre Dame try to get out of their scheduling deal, North Carolina? So you could have both conferences on both coasts imploding while the Big 12 survived.
I mean, so yeah, when you talk about the ACC, I've heard the comments from FSU that seems to draw a line in the sand that's like we're out, which is kind of like announcing I'm getting a divorce without actually filing the paperwork yet. So
that's smart too, by the way.
Yeah. So how does that? Are they basically looking to join the SEC? Is that where you think they're trying to go ultimately?
The SEC or the Big Ten. Because that's where all the money is. And, they are stuck in the ACC for 12 more years. And, I don't know. I think our music tastes are somewhat similar, but I go a little bit further back. So I will turn to the late, great philosopher Meatloaf. And basically he described the ACC grant of rights perfect in Paradise by the Dashboard Light. I swear I'll love you till the end of time. And now I'm praying for the end of time. So they're praying for this grant of rights deal to end. But yeah, Florida State they have not been shy. They want to get out. They want it. But the other thing is they don't have an invitation. So that's where it's going to be tricky. They're getting the divorce telling everyone they're going to get the divorce till they have someone else lined up. And so that will be fascinating to watch. But when that happens, you're going to see Clemson, Miami, possibly North Carolina. I think they also will do it. And it's simply to get to the Big Ten or the SEC. I don't think they care at this point. Different people I've talked to thinks, oh, the Big Ten would take them. Other people tell me, oh, the SEC would take them. Other people tell me that I trust that the SEC is has no reason to take Florida State. They already have Florida. They have the state of Florida locked up. Why do they need Florida State? Well, it may be kind of like recruiting. You may not need a quarterback, but you don't want your rival to have that quarterback, so you sign him anyway. So the SEC could do that. So the Big Ten and Fox does not get down in the Sunshine State.
No, but if that happens, if the SEC expands, right? I mean, obviously there's a TV deal that would mean less money for all the member institutions. No, okay, explain that to me, Brett.
Yeah, they would. No, look, Texas is not going to get less money. Oklahoma's not going to get less money. If the SEC adds more schools, they would get pro rata, which basically means any new members get the same amount as the existing members, and that's per school per year. I was told, though, if the SEC, there's only 2 schools that actually could generate more money for the SEC. Notre Dame's obviously one. The other one's an ACC school, which may surprise you and some of your listeners here, and that's North Carolina. And that's because North Carolina is in a state, obviously, that currently does not have a team from the Big Ten or the SEC. So you're adding a new market. So any new additions the SEC would get, none of the existing members would take less money. And if they were able to get either Notre Dame or North Carolina, their actual shares could actually increase. So this will be fascinating because there's only 2 left, and that's a Big Ten SEC. So they're going to be very, very aggressive going forward. I will say this: the SEC is not going to expand past 16 unless these teams get out of the ACC, because there's nobody they're going to take from the Pac-12, the Big 12, and certainly the Big 10 schools are going to stay in the Big 10. So everyone's kind of waiting right now, kind of focused in on the ACC and that August 15th date to see if anyone actually jumps over the wall and makes a run for it.
Brett, what happens to a Notre Dame in this mix and even like a Stanford as well? Like, next year is a 12-team playoff. So there's more people getting in and like positioning themselves in these power conferences. If these guys are on the outside looking in, I mean, what happens to some of the future of these programs?
Well, I mean, Notre Dame, they're a totally different, category. They're fine. I mean, they're negotiating right now their new TV deal with NBC. So they're going to be fine. They'll always have a path to the playoff. Stanford, we have to see what happens. Do they merge up with whatever happens with the Mountain West, or do they? A lot of people think they may go independent. They're not Notre Dame, so they're not going to. You got to have a TV deal to do that. How lucrative would that be? And also with all the conferences except cough cough, the SEC going to 9 conference games. There aren't a lot of out of conference opportunities out there. So who would Stanford play? Notre Dame has the scheduling agreement with the ACC where they play 5 ACC schools a year. Some people seem to think that Notre Dame may change that and play 5 Big Ten schools a year. There's a few problems with that. One, I don't know if they have to actually leave the ACC, even though they're not a football member, they're a member in all their other sports, all their Olympic sports, an ACC full member, and that goes through 2036. There's also a clause in their grant of rights they signed with the ACC. If Notre Dame joins a conference, they contractually are obligated to join the ACC. So Notre Dame would also have to get out of the ACC grant of rights. And then also, I'm not so sure that they could simply just call the ACC and say, hey, you know what? We want to stay a member in all of our sports except football. We still want to be aligned with you for bowl opportunities if we don't make the playoff. But we're not going to play. We're not going to play you anymore in football. Play the Big Ten. I don't think that's going to work. But Stanford's got a tough decision. They're the best athletic department, hands down, for the last 25 years. They've won the all sports competition 25 of 26, 25 of 27. I think Texas interrupted the streak in there. But, it sucks for Stanford, but it's all based on TV dollars, based on the value of your football program.
Brett McMurphy of the Action Network, formerly of ESPN. I don't know if I'm okay to mention that or not. I don't know if you have PTSD. If I mention
it's a 4-letter word, it's all right.
But it's okay. Brett, in hindsight, being it is, I'm going to shift a little bit towards Texas and see what you guys may have as far as Texas. So I'm going to ask a conference question and ask some more specifics, Brett. As far as now in hindsight, the move for Texas joining the SEC was kind of had a little bit of a shock value. But now when you see what is happening and seeing like the college football landscape, I guess USC kind of makes that move first and kind of gets this whole thing going. But did it show a lot of foresight by Texas administration to say, you know what, this Big 12 thing, sure, we're good. We can collect our checks. We can be kind of the big fish in a small pond. And even though, of course, you were at Big 12 Media Days when they talked about how much has Texas won. But at the end of the day, it ended up being a move of foresight at the end of the day, wasn't it, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, it's survival. And yeah, I mean, Chris Del Conte and Joe Castiglione, the ADs of both schools, they deserve huge credit. And look, I'm an Oklahoma State alum, and I hate the fact that Bedlam ends after this year, and everyone in Oklahoma screaming and crying that Oklahoma State fans that OU's going to the SEC or whatever. I mean, look, Oklahoma State would have done the same thing without OU. So don't pretend like Oklahoma State wouldn't have done that. But no, it was a great move by Texas and Oklahoma, and it secures the financial standpoint of the university for the next 50 years. I mean, the Big 12, they could have stayed there. They could have been the big fish in the small pond. But you know what? And I know everyone fans short for fanatical. We know why. Fans, the argument of school A needs to stay in Conference A because they have a better chance to go to the playoff and they'll dominate. That's not going to happen. Like what school in any conference has dominated and won that conference multiple years in a row in college football? It doesn't happen. And oh, by the way, if you don't win the conference, then you're not getting that big payout, or you go to a different conference and you make 2 or 3 times as much money, whether you go 12-0 or 0-12. And so, certainly I'm not saying Texas is moving or Oklahoma is moving so they can, go 6-6 every year and not be competitive. But if there are some down years in the SEC, they're still going to make double what they made if they would have won Big 12. And so
Mhm.
again, this isn't a 1 or 2 year deal. This is a 10, 20, 50-year deal. And yeah, I mean, it was smart. And you look, it's easy to go back and look at history. And I'm sure you've talked about it a lot, is, how different things would have been if Texas and OU would have ended up in the Pac-12. How different would the world be right
Mhm.
now?
That's a crazy world to think about. So think about this too. Now, all right, Brad, you were at Big 12 Media Days. You're there every year. You're at Big 12 Media Days. There's a lot of hype that's going on with Texas, and I feel like the hype machine is higher and more than any other year, at least that I've been covering this team. You have insight, Brett. You have stuff from the Action Network as well. Give me your insight and your thoughts about Texas going into this season.
They clearly are the huge favorite to win the Big 12. Like if you look at all of the there's 10 conferences. I believe Texas, maybe Georgia winning the SEC, but I think Texas and Georgia winning the Big 12 and winning the SEC are the biggest favorites of all of the 10 conferences. Um, Now, that's with that being said, they've still got to do it. I mean, they're projected our power ratings at the Action Network. Texas is projected to be favored in every game they play except at Alabama, and I believe we only have them off the top of my head is a 7-point dog.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's projected when the game gets here. It could be more, it could be less. So the schedule's there. The personnel's there. Sark's been there to put in his system. Obviously, Ewers is come back stronger, leaner, ready to go. But they've got to do it. And can they do it? That's yet to be seen. I know the guys that do our power ratings, I think they have Texas, I want to say top 6 in the country. Maybe at worst, they have them 7th. Power rated is the best team in the country. I just think the Big 12 overall, though, it's so balanced. It's so crazy. Like TCU picked to finish 7th last year. Oh, by the way, they technically they didn't win the Big 12 because they lost the conference title game, but they did get to the national championship game. I think it's going to be like that again this year. I think it's going to be crazy because I think after Texas, I think OU is everyone's picking sliding OU in there at number 2. I don't know. I need Venables to show that he can win as a head coach. And last year they struggled. Doesn't mean they'll struggle again, but you need to show me for me to be a believer. So I think after Texas, there's 10 teams that could finish anywhere from 2nd to 10th. And I think because of all that competitiveness, all that, there not being much margin between so many schools, I think the Big 12 is going to be the most competitive, the most deepest conference. And because of that, I'm not projecting, email Anwar if you don't like me. I'm not projecting the Big 12 to get to the playoff because I don't think anybody's going to get out of that league with fewer than 2 losses overall. And at least in the 14 playoff, you cannot have 2 losses. So what's that mean? Well, if Texas loses to Alabama, it means they've got to run the table. And I don't think they're going to be able to do that. And I look at the Pac-12, and I feel the same way with the Pac-12. Heck, the Pac-12, you could argue, has as far as the top 5 or 6 schools in the country, in their conference, they may have the best 5 or 6 of any conference. Now, obviously, the SEC, the Big Ten are going to challenge that. But I just think the Pac-12 is going to beat up on each other. Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA. I mean, Oregon State's vastly overrated. I know you didn't bring me on to break down the Pac-12, but I think the Pac-12 is going to be comparable to the Big 12, and that everybody's going to beat each other up. And again, with the 14 playoff, everyone wants to say power ratings. Everyone wants to say all this different minutia. But you know what, Anwar? Sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer and most obvious answer. And one thing that the playoff committee has never, ever done, and that is allow somebody with 2 in the loss column in that 14 playoff. And I think there would have to have a lot of chaos for that to happen. So I'm looking at it that Texas will lose to Alabama, although they should have beat them last year. 100% agree. It's going to be hard to win in Tuscaloosa. And if they lose that game, it's tough for them to run the table. Kind of similar with LSU and Florida State opening the season. The loser of that game is probably going to have to run the table to get in the playoff, and I don't think that's possible.
All right, so last question, Brett, and let's flip it on the other side. What happens if Texas beats Alabama on the road? Then what does that trajectory look like for you?
Oh, then not that they're in, but then they have the ability to lose a game in conference. And then, a 11-1, 12-1 Big 12 champion, Texas Longhorns, absolutely is in the playoff. I just think that they've got to, however you do it, you can't have two losses. So whether you beat Alabama or lose to Alabama, if you beat Alabama, you can lose a game in conference. You can, talking about, having bad memories. Even if they lost to Kansas.
Don't do that.
Sorry.
PTSD. Speaking of PTSD.
This will be my last appearance. But you beat Alabama and lose to Kansas and go 11-1, win the Big 12, you're in. It's just that you've got that Alabama game is such a huge game, and it sucks with the 14 playoff. But the great news is moving forward to next year when we got a 12-team playoff, teams will be able to have two losses. Heck, I think we may see a three-loss team and a 12-team playoff. But unfortunately for this year, they're not going to do it. And Georgia is double-digit. This is crazy. Georgia is a double-digit favorite in every game they play this year.
That's crazy. That's wild.
They should go 12-0, lose the SEC title game. They will be in the playoff. You think the team that wins the SEC will probably be in the playoff. So there's two spots right there. Michigan and Ohio State. One of those guys is going to get in, potentially two, but I doubt it. I don't think we're going to have an all Big Ten, all SEC playoff. Please, God, I hope not. And so the four spots are pretty much taken for, unless some craziness happens, which college football it could be. And so then out of that last spot, is it going to be somebody from the ACC, somebody from the Big 12, or somebody from the Pac-12?
Brett, tell everybody where to find your work and the great work that you guys do over at the Action Network.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Brett_McMurphy or actionnetwork.com, or you can download the Action Network app, which for the next 45, forever, it's free. I was just trying to make it sound like it's a deal there. But yeah, if you're into, we do a lot of gambling stuff. So if you want to, you can't make bets there, but if you want to get all the information on how to make your bets, we have every kind of analysis and breakdown that you could imagine to help make you a little bit smarter. And actually starting this week, we're doing a little deal where we are unveiling, if you will, the favorite musical artist of all 133 head coaches. The Big 12 is a week or so away. Anwar, you know who Sark picks, so don't spoil.
Yeah, I won't say anything. You told me. You tell me. I won't say anything.
But yes, you can check out, who your favorite coach picked or who your most hated coach picked. And I've already talked to some buddies that the coach they hate the most has the same favorite musical groups, and now they're kind of torn on which they hate him because they have the same musical taste. So, that's the best way to find me. And obviously, I tweet out a lot of your stuff because you have a lot of good insight and news with the Longhorns. And I know Texas fans, I think, have, based on what you've told me, Anwar, kind of have a love-hate relationship with me. They hate that I didn't pick Texas to win the Big 12. But I think I have earned some brownie points when I tweeted that Big 12 Media Days would be in Dallas next year. Yes. And that it was the first time that it would be held, and I put the Longhorn State instead of the Lone Star State. So now the Aggie fans are pissed off, but maybe the Texas fans enjoyed that little mention.
You put Aggie fans on such full tilt right there. I think at that point, all was forgiven, at least amongst Texas fans. So I think because if beforehand I was like, "Oh, you don't ever come here for brisket, Brett." But now after that, I think you're safe to get some good brisket here in Texas. So I appreciate that. Brett McMurphy, check him out. He's a great follow on Twitter, Action Network. And actually, Brett and I worked together in Tampa starting in the 90s at the Tampa Tribune for a newspaper that's no longer in existence. It's now condos.
Yeah, we were such great journalists that the paper folded. So, yeah.
So here we are. Oh, those were the times. All right, Brett McMurphy, I appreciate you. Thanks for joining my show.